Early evening, 2 days before Shell. As a special agent of the interior, Lamana Davari had pondered the prospect of her eventual death on more than one occasion. Certainly she'd faced down any number of compromising situations and hazardous cases. The sort of people the interior handled was seldom happy to be investigated, much less detained. Over the years, more than a few had objected in lethal ways. That was irrelevant. Attempts on her life didn't bother her anymore. They were inconveniences, something to catalogue after the fact. Such things had become a part of her life, and were only something to avoid by careful risk analysis and management of any situation entered, and followed up on every lead. You eliminated every last threat. In the course of her duties, death was possible. You accepted it. Failure, on the other hand, was unforgivable. In the service of Her Imperial Highness, her abilities had taken her far, all the way to the very inner sanctum of family protection for the Imperial family. It was the apotheosis of Lamana's career, a gesture of Her Imperial Majesty's trust, and while Princess Kalira had initially seemed a reasonably quiet assignment, the death of the heir had set off a cascade of events that remained in motion. The first attempt on Kalira's life had been foiled, though in hindsight that spoke more to a choice of poor tools. It was extemporaneous planning, taking advantage of the radically altered conditions. It had been an attack of opportunity, and it could just have easily succeeded. Had Warwick not been present, it likely would have. Admittedly, without the human, Admiral Tajo's motives would have been readily called into question. However, the odds of Tajo surviving long enough to answer questions felt remote. One did not choose an erratic agent without expecting a mess, or having plans to clean up after them. Regardless, it was a moot issue. The Admiral had died on human steel, which did not eliminate the cause, only a symptom. The situation remained grave, and there were aggravating factors in play, not the least of which was Princess Kalira taking the initiative. The House of Tassu was renowned for many virtues, but patience was seldom one of them. There were any numbers of ways this could end with a very bad death. First, she'd have to avoid death by exasperation. A smaller version of this meeting could have taken place in the bunker, but between the princess's insistence on recruiting her friends, Professor Warwick, this Pezrin girl, and hinging her plans around these visiting humans, exposing the one fully secure facility on the campus posed an unwarranted risk. All of which merely entail securing a conference room out of the IOTC building on campus, ensuring the area was monitored, pulling in the 5 of her 8 commando pods, having Lieutenant Tala secure communications, and looping in Princess Indara, checking as Jaxmi Chelksa and the Kerbal twins escorted the visiting professors, and minding Princess Kalira as she ran herd over her friends. The difficult could be done immediately. The impossible only required more subordinates. With the details handled by her captains, she'd expected this to be a fairly straightforward presentation. With Princess Indara leading the meeting, and given her unexpected revelation regarding her wives and husband, Lamana watched her task list grow longer, but it was manageable, with well-organized goals. It was the sort of planning she appreciated. Princess Indara and her family brought additional expertise as active commandos, and while Indara would be attending with her family in her role as a princess of the Imperium, that meant her personal bodyguard would also be present. The visible one. While more than a few of them appeared to be human, Princess Indara's personal security brought the total available detail up to 11 pods. As for the humans, their visibility would be an asset. Despite the hope that the operation would not turn into a combat situation, the number of combat-ready assets was reassuring. Unfortunately, these humans, the painters, had yet to inspire her confidence. So, we could speak individually when we receive the award. Samuel Forsyth Painter seemed like the sensible one. At the moment, he was looking over the gathering, running through his thoughts and seemingly organizing them on the fly. Considering the science, we could draw a talk out for as long as you need, though sooner or later they'll get restless. It won't be enough. The other one, Dr. Sammy Painter Forsyth, was shaking his... their head? We have a man on the inside. Princess Indara spoke over the conference line. He's been in the Northern Palace for a while now. We can get word to him nightly. If the evidence against Camaldry is there, he should be able to reduce the search area. Sammy Painter's tousled yellow hair bobbed around them. It won't be enough, she grumbled into the silent room. Normally, Lamanna would have been thrilled that the students were holding their peace, but this Sammy person was being intractable enough for a choir of 12-year-olds. Their reluctance was growing aggravating. I'm sorry, it just won't, Sam. Hey, we've done more with less, Sam insisted, looking at his counterpart affectionately. It took me a couple of days to write that suite of security overrides, but trust me, once it's slipped into the system, we're home free. They'll still be chasing it down for hours, and that's after they notice in the first place. Lamanna's teeth ground slowly. Giving up her security code to the little green-eyed human had been a trying experience. Planting a computer virus in an Imperial facility, a palace no less, ran counter to everything she was. Regardless of their dubious insistence that her codes wouldn't be traced back, to have the gesture dismissed so casually was galling. It's still not enough. Sammy rubbed their eyes. Sammy, all we have to do is hold a presentation, while my virus does the hard part. The male, Sam, frowned thoughtfully. If that's not enough, what is? Sam, that's exactly why it's not enough. Taking out the security system only makes it a matter of how many people we have against how many personnel the palace has. You've seen it. We just don't have enough to pull this off. Sammy looked dolefully up at their partner. Maybe if I had 3 months to put something like this together, and we had all the information we needed, sure. But by the end of next week, it's just not enough. Sammy, we have 10 pods of Death's Head commandos. You, me, Agent Davari, Princess Indara and her family, Princess Kalira, a detailed download of the palace layout, and an agent on the inside. Sam sighed. We've managed a lot more in the past with a lot less. What's the matter? With more or less in the past? Most of our assets are going to be visible, so they can't help. Sammy shook their head. This is a snatch and grab. If the idea is to get the proof without leaving a trace, this can't turn into an invasion. And if it's not a snatch and grab, what's the point? Hell, Prince Adam spoke up over the comm. If we led with a warrant, the palace staff would have to review it. That would give Zareva and her folks all the time they need to flush any data. All we come up with is static. Lamanna nodded grimly. While she had been about to make the same point, it was refreshing that someone else understood these things. If Dr. Forsyth Painter seemed unconvinced, at least the prince had a firm grasp on the matter. Right, Sammy nodded miserably. That's why it's not enough. You have us, one of the Kerbal twins spoke up. While they were practically fawning over the Sammy human, at least their loyalty to the princess was admirable. We know, girls, and we appreciate it. But this is about slipping in and out. Their guards are going to be watching our guards, and the guests, and the perimeter, and the palace, inside and out. But as big as it is, they have the personnel on hand to do all of it. So you add complications. Play shadow games. Lamanna canted her head, as Professor Warwick spoke up for the first time. Look, I get most of this. Even why you want to go dark. I remember something about using old technology to hide new technology. Why not just flood the place with people and use old tech to smuggle it out? In the meantime, you just need to add more of everything. Give them too much to watch. Steganography, Sam nodded, is a good idea, but Miss Chokes' letter was low on details. Pretty understandable in hindsight, but we didn't come equipped for something like that. We could have, but we didn't, so we can't. Sammy looked around the room unhappily. We packed as fast as we could to get to Shill, but we didn't think it would be anything like this. I mean, old tech is a great idea. We just didn't bring any. What about something like a Game Boy? Desi Pelavon perked up. There are a few things like that in the library collection. Will they work? You have a Game Boy? Sammy sat up and blinked thoughtfully. What cartridges do they have? Those might help. They would, but while we can cover the software, I'm starting to think Sammy is right about the physical issues. Sam frowned up at the ceiling, mulling it over. It's not even the palace security. There's also 120 tables worth of the nobility to dine there during the presentation. They're all going to have personal security on hand. Sure, that adds to the demand on the palace staff, and that's mostly a help, but it still adds hundreds of trained professionals keeping an eye on the area. We can't just rule them out as a problem. So, what have we got for our assets? Warwick added. At our each, we have 12 students. 11, maybe 10 pods of Death's Head commandos from the school, and Princess Indara. A handful of antiques, a suite of computer viruses, 3 professors, 2 princesses, and 1 special agent of the interior. Sam summed up. That sounds good, but not against the full staff of an imperial palace. This table says the palace maintains 20 pods of commandos as standard. Half of them are gone with Princess Camordry, Lamanna muttered, though it didn't feel helpful. That evens things up. Fine, but there's still hundreds of the regular security staff, hundreds more in the personal security for all the guests lodging around, plus the guests themselves. Samuel shrugged, gesturing toward the chart on the omnipad. Then there's this interior agent too, this Kadira Sariva, plus her staff. I am very familiar with Special Agent Sariva. Her staff is also reduced while Princess Camordry is away. Sariva isn't known for her trusting nature, but the ones who remain will be her most competent subordinates. Lamanna knew the woman by professional reputation, but that wasn't the issue. It felt like a disaster was in motion, but no one seemed willing to stop it. She sighed inwardly, as a playful thought came to mind. If it helps, Miss Zenshiki is essentially invisible to sensors once you turn out the lights. What? Sam blinked, as Sammy sat up. Hey, that's so nifty. We can find her, though we practically have to know where she is. Once we dial the sensitivity up far enough, we can pick up the residual heat off her clothing. Davari pressed the point with some satisfaction. Admittedly, with the sensitivity that high, the ambient heat nearly washes her out, but it's essentially possible to track her. I am sitting right here, and your people aren't supposed to know about that. The Pezrin girl managed an admirable glower. Though if I had my skin suit on, we could essentially talk about this later, when you are asleep. Sammy sighed forlornly, resting their chin in their hands. If only we had a caterer. We do have a caterer. It was supposed to be a surprise. Princess Clara blinked. A restaurant called Human Food is doing the whole event in your honor. Oh, that's completely different. Sammy bounded out of their chair, hands on their hips, but they were grinning now. Why didn't you just say we had a caterer? Zenshiki watched the matter unfold and smoldered in her chair. The Shulvanti knowing one of her people's secrets was galling but manageable. She would have to inform her warband that the knowledge was out, though for the moment it appeared to be contained. This entire plot matter smelled of dangerous intrigue, which was acceptable. Her Hakat was a part of the planning, which was excellent. While the plan, such as it was, did not put him in danger, she would be in an excellent position to distinguish herself and earn her name. Still, it was annoying, and it felt needful to poke at this agent. Possibly not wise, but it was satisfying. Oh, that's completely different! The human who captivated the twins was baring their teeth in an inane smile. Why didn't you just say we had a caterer? She could hear the twins sigh wistfully, and nearly winced in revulsion. Professor Warwick helps out at the restaurant all the time, and I'm, seen someone there who could help. Melondi, no, Princess Kalira of the Shorvanti Empire, was nodding gamely. They have a staff of 12.
That was going to need consideration, but not just now.
That's pretty good. The Sami person wrung their hands. But 12 people won't be enough for 120 tables. That still leaves over 100 of the palace staff in the room, working the event. You have us. Sefe sat up, though the girl was so tall, the effort was redundant. If Shinshiki is off doing something invisible, that still leaves 11 of us, plus the 12 guys out at Human Food. They do a great purple service, and we can learn how. Princess Kalira pursed her lips in thought, even as Princess Indara broke the silence.
Kelly, you know public service means one waiter per table, and the quality has to be outstanding. It's a good idea, but the Northern Palace is Kadira's domain. Where are you going to get another 90 waiters you can trust?
The interior woman scowled briefly, and Shinshiki took some satisfaction in her discomfort. Perhaps she could have enjoyed it more if she hadn't also been sucked into this plan. Still, she'd given her word, and her word was binding, and intriguing opportunities were coming within reach of her claws. The revelation that Melondi was Princess Kalira also brought her family's good fortune into a rather interesting light. Being given Shangdong and Tsingtao now seemed a pitiful recompense, and she glanced over at Desi and the princess balefully.
An admirably played treachery using my honor against me. I'll have to find a way to thank my sister.
There are an additional 28 girls I could acquire, Davari said speculatively, but appeared to warm up to an idea.
They're the right age to fit in, and they're under oath.
They just need training. With your permission, ma'am, I can make arrangements.
Granted, I can arrange the training.
Melondi, who was Kalira, grinned enthusiastically.
Professor Warwick, couldn't we ask Mr. Desari and Vadim? He's a 4-sun-rated chef, and Vadim's coming up fast. If Agent Davari can arrange compensation for their time, I know they could do it.
There are discretionary funds, Davari trailed off, looking over at her, Hakat.
I can ask, Princess. We still need, what? Another 70-odd people who know how to serve and aren't on the Northern Palace staff? Warwick glanced uncertainly over at the agent before looking back at Melondi. I'm sure Vadim and Berdine could train you up well enough to pass, and maybe another 20 or 30 more, but another 70? Maybe in a month, but in a week? It's just too much. Shinshiki watched Melondi Kalira, but her psyche flickered with interest as her sister leaned over to the princess. The whisper was admirably quiet for a Shorvanti, but it still reached her ears.
Hey, Mel, what about the guys out at the tide pool? Sure, they're dancers, but they all wait tables too. The males at the tide pool?
Agent Davari, I know where we can get the rest of the staff we need, though we'll need to contact Professor Jimenez.
The male dancers, from something called the tide pool.
Shinshiki cleared her throat.
I can acquire a skin suit, and I am practiced in infiltration, though I could use help from another Persian if there's one on the staff.
Of course, she had her own, but there was merit in creating the illusion of effort, after all. The tide pool. The entity was unfamiliar to her, but she would track it down. This had already become interesting, but now there were benefits. Desi listened as the plan evolved, but couldn't help watching Special Agent Davari. The woman was frightening. She spent years planning to infiltrate the academy as a student. Years, when it was only a half-realized dream. Years sweating through every class to make certain she earned her grades and could handle the classes here. The good times, befriending the Thario family, who'd been such a lifeline, and convincing them to help her with her school clothing so she wouldn't stand out. The tough times, actually faking her admission and waiting for an acceptance. When it came, it had meant 4 years of driving study to graduate with a real future ahead of her, never letting slip who and what she was.
She thought she was single-minded. Lamana Davari was focused like a laser, and it was chilling to watch. The woman who presented herself as the amiable, even slightly ditzy Professor Davari of the music department was completely different. Personable, pleasant to the students, and dedicated. The Lamana Davari in this room was something entirely other. Desi was still able to look in the mirror and see herself. This Davari was devoid of warmth, devoid of anything personable. Seemingly devoid of anything but her task. It was like seeing her rendered down to a singular, consuming purpose, leaving nothing but a blank space where a person should be. It made Desi's skin crawl. Watching her father stand his ground made her proud, yet nervous at the same time. Did he somehow not understand the woman was an agent of the interior? Did he not care? Agent Davari, it has to be done this way. Tom looked over at Sam, who nodded agreeably, while Sammy was animatedly poking at their omnipad. It's the only way this works. That's preposterous. The more factors you introduce, the greater the risk of discovery. Davari brushed her hand in the air as if dismissing him. It becomes a matter of diminishing returns. A recipe for disaster. The interior needs to watch the Keystone Cops, because that's the whole point. Her father crossed his arms. It will look like a disaster precisely because it's supposed to. A double bluff or a triple cross I could understand. This Davari had a demeanor like an Adixie. Well, alright, she'd only met the Adixie from the legal department, but they certainly hadn't broken the stereotype. Davari was still just as focused, and now she was getting terse. 12 is preposterous. You people love base 12. Anyway, adding more people isn't the issue. Most of them don't have to know what's going on to play their part. Actually, I think it's pretty cool. Prince Adam spoke over the conference line, and Agent Davari stilled. The matter was settled, for now, though her expression was no less thunderous. The prince whispered something that was just barely audible before Princess Indara spoke up. Doctors, are you confident that your virus will work? Oh, that. I've proofed Sam's virus. If your person can get it in the system, it'll work perfectly. Sammy chirped happily. I just need a combination cipher to trigger it off. The system is set up on base 12, so I set it for 9, just to keep them guessing. 9 numbers? Tom looked at the painters thoughtfully. 567 68 0515. Hey, that's perfect! If the dictionary used a picture to define happiness, Sammy would be it. How did you know that, anyway? Desi blinked as Samuel shook his head and switched to English. She thought she got most of it. Seriously? Sam looked up, pursing his lips. Richard Nixon's social security number? What? I wasn't always a sexy space babe surrounded by college girls. Tom shrugged with a mischievous smile. Besides, 867-5309 is too short. Don't worry about the groupies. Sammy flipped back to Vatica, nodding solemnly. You'll get used to it. Sam looked over at the twins and tried not to roll his eyes. Sammy. Oh, don't mind Mr. Grumpy. He hasn't found any new admirers. Hey, somebody had to write the virus. Over the conference line, Prince Adam started to snicker. The auditorium was secure. Back at the bunker, Lieutenant Tala and her pod were running the sweeps with Pod 5 on standby. If anything went wrong, Tala would wake Captain Sitar and her girls. Everything was fine. As the meeting started to break up, Captain Salani Tony's hunkered down in the back row, trying desperately not to blush. Her pod was not helping. I think Kala is wrong. He isn't too old, Sergeant Vaco offered. Do you really want to go for him? Of course she does. She gets to follow them around all weekend, too. Sergeant Kalani canted her head, looking at Salani happily. I bet you have a cunning plan, don't you, Captain? One more day and a wake-up, but if we weren't in a crowded room, I swear I'd strangle them both. Of course she does. I bet it's a plan so cunning that... Captain Captain Turnus! Special Agent Devari's voice cut through the background chatter, shaking her out of her reverie of choking Kala with a papaya. Solani shot to her feet. Hiding wasn't an option now. Yes, ma'am. A few minutes ago, I relayed a message to Professor Zerhollis. While she was somewhat befuddled, I trust I was reasonably direct. Please take your pod outside and bring in the IOTC cadets. Devari checked her omnipad. She was back to wearing a thoughtful smile. They have exactly 19 minutes to report. Yes, ma'am. Thankfully, her girls didn't need to be told twice. Maybe he didn't see me. Jedri Shalara was not having a good night. This couldn't be real. Over 4 years in the academy, she'd worked her way up to senior agent of the IOTC. In all that time, no one had actually ever used a call-out. Now, here she was, freezing her tits off in the middle of the night, and it was nearly fucking winter. She left her cousin, Predis, on hold, and that bitch was dangling a lead on a real date. Graduation was on the horizon, and then a real career with the interior beckoned. That was real power. Whatever this shit was, it better be good. If Professor Zaholis was just fucking around, she'd regret it. Maybe not soon, but eventually. Still, she followed her orders, formed her girls up and made it to the training grounds with 3 minutes to spare, even taking a moment to chew out Cadet Agent Alindra for being late. There was no sign of Professor Zaholis. The 3 women who met her formation, on the other hand. Even the youngest of them looked like she could bench press a Taurox. They were all lean, fit, and fully kitted out in BDUs. As she brought her formation to a halt, the oldest of them stepped forward. Right, all of you, fall out. Inside, and fall in at the auditorium. Uncertainty gripped Shalara, but training took over. You cadets have wax in your ears? Fall out! Whatever this was, it had better be good. Lamana Devari watched the IOTC cadets fall in with a clinical eye. So many memories. The meeting had come to an end some time ago, and without the presence of Princess Indara, she felt she was on surer footing to take matters in hand. At her request, Princess Clara and several of the other girls remained behind. The plan, such as it was, would go forward, resting on her shoulders to ensure it was a success, or at the least, that the life of Princess Clara was not put in jeopardy. She waited patiently as the girl stood to parade rest and ran a hand over her hair. She'd had time to tuck it up properly, instead of the long loose braid favoured by Professor Duvari, and while she wasn't wearing her purples, sometimes the simple gestures to fashion helped create the right state of mind. Looking over the bedraggled cadets, it was hard not to smile. They'd managed to appear on time, mostly in uniform. It would do. Cadet Senior Agent Shalara, step forward, she said, congenially, offering the girl an encouraging smile. Shalara was something of a brute, but she had a manner of getting things done. The interior required blunt force now and then, and the girl would likely enjoy a productive but unspectacular career before retiring to her mother's title. What is all this? Shalara eyed the other students, including the princess. After being formally addressed, it was a regrettable error. Interesting to see 2 of the cadets wince, but the girl blundered on, heedless. Is this something to do with that war game Cadet Amadis was asking about? Cadet Senior Agent. Devari looked the girl up and down as she stepped closer. My name is Lamana Devari. The music professor? What is all this? Perhaps not that productive a career. You will address me as Special Agent. Devari looked over the girl once more. Her uniform had been hastily tucked in, of course, but drawing attention to the shabby affair made a point. You are aware of the Family Services Division, perhaps? Shalara stewed in uncertainty as comprehension dawned. You, Cadet Agent, Amadis.
Davari nodded at one of the girls who'd had the sense to wince, if not the tact to hide it. Define the role of the Family Services Division. The girl licked her lips briefly.
It's a senior department, devoted directly to close-in protection services for the imperial family, and granted extrajudicial powers to act in...
Very good. Really, your textbooks could not have expressed it better. Davari offered the girl a warm smile before turning back to Shalara. She'd torn the girl down in front of her troop, if only slightly. It was necessary to establish who was in charge, but now it was time to build the girl back up, if possible. Cadet Senior Agent, as of this evening, the oaths of service for your troop are now activated. I trust I can count upon you for the mission ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Special Agent.
Ma'am is perfectly acceptable.
I don't believe this.
The mutter came from the Chelsa girl. If memory serves, she was trying to work her way into the student council, though Shalara reportedly used the venue to be particularly overbearing. It was a foible that early service ironed out. Ideally. Ah yes, the civilians in the room. Davari turned to spare the Chelsa girl an appraising look. Commendably, the girl had the good sense to stop speaking. Over the next 2 weeks, your troop will be working with these girls. You will learn to wait tables to a degree of proficiency expected of you, and perform this duty at the forthcoming presentation of the Imperial Science Award by their Royal Highnesses, Princess Indara and Princess Kalera. You will conduct yourselves in the manner I expect of you. Not your IOTC instructor, me. Do you have any questions? Questions were good. She approved of agents that asked questions.
You want us to wait tables? I'm a Duchess's daughter.
Of course, some questions were more obtuse than others. Still, there was the benefit of the doubt. I see you've grasped the essentials admirably, so I will presume that was not a question. Davari looked the girl over laconically. I trust you do have one.
It's the real first social occasion that's happened since the death of Princess Kalandri. Some of our parents are invited, ma'am.
The girl licked her lips.
What do we say if we're seen?
Not entirely dim. Or perhaps some survival instinct. Davari nodded sympathetically. You are a cadet senior agent of the IOTC?
Yes, ma'am.
You practice drill regularly. In my spare moments, I enjoy keeping an eye on you girls. Davari offered an encouraging nod. In truth, she had no time to spare, but it never did any harm to imply you're being watched. Your troop is quite good at it.
Thank you, ma'am.
As a member of the Interior, you will be expected at some stages of your career to go undercover, precisely as I am. Such operations require you to develop unexpected skills and deal with impromptu situations. That is why, starting tomorrow, you have 1 week to learn the skill of waiting tables. Think of waiting tables as a drill. Throw yourselves into it, because this assignment is not a drill. Lamanna indulged herself, waving a hand in the air and taking on a conversational tone. The smile, however, fell away by degrees. Your Imperial Highness and the Ministry of the Interior are depending on you to get it right. I can count upon you, can't I?
Yes, ma'am.
Good. She stepped back and cocked her head slightly. Other questions?
Ma'am, the civilians?
Shalara didn't repeat the mistake of looking away, and the question, if sloppy, was still adequate.
With respect, may I ask?
Why are they here in your building after you've been called out in the middle of the evening? Davari looked behind her to Princess Kalera. The girl wore no expression other than watching speculatively. It was acceptable. Preferable, really. The late Princess Kalandri enjoyed a good rapport with her military aides, but she'd never been truly comfortable with her handlers. Prince Lorau was kept so sequestered by his handler that his private demeanour was impossible to know, though he was rumoured to be a doting father. As for Princess Kamordri, she was reputed to have been a precocious child and a trial to work with during her stint in the interior. It was quietly remarked that she was given to excessive whimsy, though she was close to her handler, Kadira Ariva. Given the alternatives, a quiet nod to proceed, without reservation or posturing, was gratifying. Cadets, I would like to introduce Her Royal Highness, Princess Kalira Tassu.
Goddess, I thought she was going to pee herself.
Jaxmi nudged the door closed as she and Melondi returned, bringing out the remaining stash of the chocolate.
I know this isn't a game, Mel, but honestly, I don't know how you could keep a straight face. Watching Davari handle Shalara is a memory I'll treasure forever. You still shouldn't have said anything,
Melondi offered to the others, pausing in her inspection of the chocolate.
I know they're difficult. Girls like Shalara tend to get shuffled off. I know,
Jack scrambled, as Mel passed the bowl over to Sephir.
It's just as well that the twins took the painters home early. Kamara's headed up to her tusks with her. Yes, well, at their best, the interior is vital to the Empire.
Melondi picked open a wrapper, keeping her voice serene.
Things like keeping an eye on certain families, maybe the ones accumulating staggering wealth on the sly. Oh, Kalira?
Desi sat at the table, waiting her turn, but Melondi looked up. Desi never called her that.
I know they're needed, and people are afraid of them. I mean, Lark was a mess after that meeting.
The stubborn feeling rising inside her washed away, and Melondi grimaced.
Is she going to be all right? Sephir, Priss, and Belder are checking on her, Nesva said, settling back quietly. Anyone know why she was so rattled? I do.
It was a difficult admission, and she looked down at the chocolate bar in her hands, setting it aside. It wasn't very appealing, all of a sudden. It's something to do with your security, isn't it? Desala canted her head. Something happened between your agent and Lark.
Yes. The way Lark got into the academy got Davari suspicious. She's pretty direct,
Melondi said frankly, though the look she gave Desala held a wary regret.
I'll make it up to her, but given my situation, I can't blame Davari either.
I get it, Desala nodded. This is your life on the line. Goddess, you could be our next empress.
Kamordra is the elder sister,
Mel offered, defensively.
Can I say it?
Desi spoke up.
I'll say it as your friend because we're alone and no one else will. It may be treason to say it out loud, but from everything I've heard, Kamordra is a total mess. The nobility might not say so, but word gets around.
You're a noble too now, Jax grinned. Give up. Come up to the surface and see the light.
She's right,
Desala spoke up, interrupting the words rising to Melondi's lips.
Look, I get it. Family can be a total mess. No matter how much you might love them and want to defend them, it doesn't change the truth, no matter how much you want it to.
Silence fell around the table, save for the crackle of wrappers.
Fine.
Mel bit her lower lip, thoughtfully.
I could spend all night offering guesses about why you're right, but you're right.
Thank the deeps that's out of the way, Desi huffed, making a late grab for the bowl.
You're a good woman, and you could be a great empress. Desi is right, Nesva spoke up. I mean, she always is, but this time? No doubt about it. Most of the noble families, ones like mine, we carve out our niche and do what we're best at, generation after generation, and for better or worse. It works, but it works a lot better if the woman on the throne is someone we can all rely on. Thanks. I appreciate it.
The warm glow Melondi felt inside was worth it. Despite everything she was dragging them into, these were her friends, and they weren't being dragged. Not really. They were coming along for the ride.
Hey, where did Zenshiki get off to, anyway? Has anyone let her try chocolate? She muttered something on the way back about the game and pulling my eyeballs out, Desi snorted. I think she's starting to warm to me, though. It was kind of said with affection. Why don't you check on her? I mean, we're moving movie night off till the day after tomorrow, so Belle won't miss it.
Mel gestured at the almost empty bowl.
But I don't think the chocolate's going to last that long. Sure, I'll grab her.
Desi hauled herself off the floor and headed to the door, her voice mimicking the Pedrin's dusky tone.
Desi, I'm going to scalp you and use it for hair extensions. Desi, I can't tell if you're killing me or making me stronger. Desi, it's not social anxiety, I just hate you. Desi.
Alone in the blessed solitude of her room, Zinchiki examined herself critically in the mirror. A Pejrin skin suit was a miracle of craftsmanship. Designed for covert operations, it was lightweight and form-fitting. The microfibers of the suit mimicked the heat-dampening qualities of Pejrin fur perfectly, though the true brilliance of the design was the miniature comm unit, scanner, and the suite of tools, powered by the two small power bells that hung around her waist and draped around her neck. A marvel of design, the belt balanced over her hip contained a plethora of useful lockpicks, as well as a scanner that would penetrate most structures. There was a small but powerful comm suite, capable of integrating with other skin suits. Best of all, there was a compact EMP device capable of one use. Properly employed, it would scramble any unshielded circuits within a reasonable range. The skin suit was scant, but that allowed it to be hidden under normal clothing on an approach. Given the warmth of fur, skin suits avoided overheating in warm climates and made the most of a Pejrin's natural stealth. It wasn't the right tool for every situation, but for surreptitious access and aggressive appropriation, it was perfect. It was a matter of honor to provide for your warband. After all, sometimes the best way to help the family was by helping yourself. Pejrin understood the law, of course. Civilization could not exist without rules. But custom was another matter, and custom was clear. There was right, there was wrong, and in between there was the principle of caveat keket, or value against the risk of capture. After all, life was hard, a test of survival when resources were scarce. You couldn't always get what you want. Still, if you tried sometimes, you could get what you need. Looking herself over in the mirror, she nodded at the suit in approval. A charcoal grey that neatly matched her fur, her band sisters said it nearly made her look nude. They were only jealous. In the dark, it made her virtually invisible.
I am grace. I am stealth. I am the embodiment of the Dark Mother who watches over the cold side of Pesh, ready to take the unwary. I am the night.
There was a knock at the door. Then Desi barged into the room.
Hey, Zinchiki, you want to come join us for some chocolate?
Her eyes closed slowly, and her claws flexed.
The night forgot to lock the damn door.
Hey, where'd you get the neat bikini?